Hi, I'm Streaky from Streaky.com. Today I'm reviewing the SSL Fusion. I'm Streaky, I'm a mastering engineer. I've been doing it for 25 years. I work with super high end, super low end and everyone in between. And so today I am going through how I've been using this as a mastering engineer, and I'll show you different sounds and effects and everything else that I've been thinking about it and what I've been doing with it for the last couple of weeks. So everyone's been asking me to review it in the comments for quite a while. They have sent me one over. I think they're running out of them, so that's why it took them so long to get one over to me. Also, as I'm a mastering engineer, I'm guessing that they decided I wasn't worthy because they're looking at mix engineers, so I felt a bit snubbed, but now I'm okay because they've sent it over, so it's happy days. Let me just run through the basic features of it before we get stuck into how it sounds and things like that. So what do I personally think of the look and feel of the box? Fairly heavy bit of kit. I'm sure I haven't opened up the top, which I wish I had now, but I haven't, just to see how it's inside. It's got loads of features. Basically, they're saying this is a stereo analog color box. I don't know if you saw my video on the Louder Than Liftoff Silver Bullet. I'll link it here. It's a very similar colouring device to this. So that came out first, then this has come out from SSL. So SSL probably aren't selling as many desks as they used to. I don't think everybody's really got room or budget or use for a big mixing console these days. So these little boxes are probably we're gonna see some more of these, different shapes and sizes and different things from SSL. So this is pretty cool. Everyone seems to be loving it ridiculously. So what do I think? Let's go through the features. There's an input trim here. It's got a little detent on the 0 so you know where you are. There's some overload lights just to keep you aware of what's happening. You have a high pass filter which has 30, 40 and 50. Personally, I'd like to have seen that gone down to sort of 18 or 20 as well. But you know, I'll kind of say as I go all the things that I like and dislike really. So then it goes on to a vintage drive. So this is to push, you can push into it, it kind of colours the sound up. The only major issue I have with this is that as soon as you put it in, it's super hissy. So for mastering, that's a bit of a problem, but there's, you know, it's got a sound. So it's got a drive on it and a density so that you can sort of have variations upon the sound of that. There is a violet EQ. Now this is just a kind of two shelves, so a bottom and a top shelf. So the bottom shelf is 30, 50, 70 and 90 Hertz, and the top shelf is 8K, 12K, 16K and 20K. And then you've got this pot which goes up in +3, +6, +9. So obviously for me as a mastering engineer, it's quite dodgy because I want it so it's detented at least. You've only got a detent on the 0. You haven't got it stepped all the way round. So for a mastering, I'd rather that. These are obviously step pots, but these aren't. So quite big increments for me as a mastering engineer, but for a mix engineer, it shouldn't really be that much of a problem. Then there's a high frequency compressor which has a threshold and a crossover point. So that's the crossover where it's only obviously compressing the tops against the bottom. So that starts at 3K and goes all the way to 20. So for that, I guess the usage for this, apart from the obvious of being a de-esser, high frequency compressors are very well known within mastering circles for using them on lathes. Lathes don't like excessive top end, so you use a high frequency compressor, also known as an acceleration limiter, on a lathe for that. So this is handy for getting rid of that kind of tizzy digital sound on things, as well as doing vocals. So on the threshold, you just got to watch that. It's a green light and it goes to red if you're getting a little bit too excitable about that. And then there's a stereo image, which essentially is a width. So what it's doing is pulling the sides out, the level of the sides out, to give it some space, some width. And then there's a space knob too, which is detented at 0. As you pull it down to the minus, it is monoing the bass. So what it's doing is taking away the sides at, I'm not sure what the frequency is. To my ear, it sounds around 150, that it's started the way the crossover point is. I could be wrong. It is starting to take away. It does it in quite big increments, -4, -8, -12. So you may use this in combination with the stereo image to widen the stereo and then obviously anything in the bass to then mono. But also you can use it as to push a little bit out in the stereo on the low end as well. So just lift the bottom end. Sometimes that can make things sound quite chunky. So that can work quite well. So it's got this transistor button that you can press, which is, again, is another kind of emulation of a desk. So you get another sound. So instead of, you don't sort of drive it in the same way you do with the bottom colour, but you can just use that and just hear how that sounds. To me, it seems like it's cutting a little bit of low end and kind of tightening and thinning and things, and gets a little bit more edgy in the mids. Very transistory sounding, so yeah, very kind of, I would say, more brittle sounding, but it's still pretty good. It's nice. And then it has these insert points, which basically what that does is you can insert it before the EQ, or you can insert it at the end here. And what you can do on that is, so that if you've got a compressor or something you want to put in front of the EQ, so then the EQ becomes the back, and then you can put a compressor or something before the EQ, then you can insert that. You can also, if you hold down the button, it goes into MS mode. So that means you could put a parametric EQ or maybe a compressor. So if you wanted to just compress the low end, then you could put the space on, you could compress it, and then you could bring it in with the space. So you get a nice big sound, big punchy low end, and then bring it in tight so that it isn't too wide and flabby. So there's a few different options for that. I thought for mastering, if you were using this type of box, having that insert in, you could literally put your whole chain in this point here. So, or at the end, but I would say you put it in here, so that at the end you've got your stereo width and you've got your high frequency and stuff that you're doing. And if you've got everything else in your analog chain before this, even if you wanted to put a little bit more top or bottom on, you could do, then you can clean it up a little bit and keep it all nice and sort of analog and warm. So that's quite nice. So it could be used as a kind of switcher box. There's no switches in and out for your analog equipment, but it's, as a desk, it's quite good. So you could be going in, doing your analog input, going into your analog equipment, and then adjusting the analog trim on the way out before it goes to your A to D. So quite a nice little feature, that, the insert, and you can have that before. If they did a little switcher box, that'd be even handier, because then you could put the switcher on there and have that as part of your chain before you get into all of this. But I think for a mastering tool, they would need, which I think they definitely should do, it's really worth it for a mastering tool, but just to have stepped pots, it'd be a little bit more expensive. They'd probably have to make the pots a little bit bigger. They're a little bit clumsy and a little bit more kind of mixed recording world pots at the moment, but if they're a bit bigger and stepped, you're getting into sort of mass select territory really, and if they could keep the price low, then they'd have a good market on their hands, I think. There's a bypass button here at the end, just getting towards the end. You've got some meters so you can see how much level is going out of the end into your A to D. And then there is a bypass, and you can do the bypass post input trim. So you could trim the inside and then just bypass this. If you hold on to that, you can adjust the trim so that you can then hear exactly what the unit's doing when you've got that held down. So that's really great, because you can fool yourself very easily with level, especially in this drive section, because the drive starts at 1 and goes up to 11 for obviously some really naff engineers Spinal Tap reference, as they like to do. But yeah, starting at 1, it's already got some noise and 1 dB on there. So just to adjust your input so that you can bypass that and hear what's going on is pretty handy. What we're going to do now, I'm going to put it back into my desk. We're going to run some music through it, and then you can hear the different ins and outs of how that sounds before and after Yeah, so let's get into that. Please don't forget to press up the thumb button if you're liking this video, and remember to subscribe if you want this kind of content. If you haven't subscribed already, please go to streaky.com. I have a newsletter. It's the Audio Anoraks newsletter. Only goes out once a month. It's full of discounts on software and hardware and giveaways on software and hardware too, and loads of other things that I can't point you to on YouTube, but I will do there. So go to streaky.com and sign up for the newsletter. As I say, once a month, no spam, I promise. I also have a course running at the moment. If you want to learn how to master with me, then go to streaky.com for that too. So before we get into the samples, this is a revised section from the original video that I first posted, basically because I forgot to kind of say a few little pieces, so I thought I'd do a revised bit. Now, when you're listening to equipment like this, you've got to make sure that the levels are pretty balanced, because what happens is you can be very fooled by the level that's coming out. So on the vintage drive section, for example, it starts at +1. So you're always going to be gaining a dB there. So as a mastering engineer, I always like things flat so that I can hear, and I'm very much in control of half dBs and 1 dB steps. Now, if you're using the Fusion for mixing or using it as a tracking device, then obviously it's going to be totally different to how I use it as a mastering engineer. You're probably going to push into it more. But I always would suggest listen it in the same way when you've got a compressor. Listen to it when you're kind of unity gaining it. So same with the limiter, same with most things that you do. It's always good to try and get the input the same as the output, so you can hear exactly what the plug-in or the hardware or whatever is doing. Because a lot of the times with compressors, you can be pumping a load of gain in, it can be sounding like it's going higher, but really it's crushing the sound down a bit. And if you had it at unity gain, then you would hear that it's actually bringing the stuff down. I think a lot of people miss that on compressors. So that's the same with the vintage drive on here. Yeah, it sounds great when you've got it pumped in +3 dB. Of course it does. You're adding 3 dB of level, and you've got a bit of kind of the grunt of the vintage drive. Now, I also in this video say transistor at the end, but it's actually a transformer, the button at the end, so please excuse me for that little error. And when it comes to the sound, people were asking me in the comments of the first time I put the video up what I thought of the sound. Now, the vintage drive I really liked. It was really a bit too noisy for mastering, but I still used it and I liked it. It had a really good vibe to it. I thought the EQ was okay. I used the 12K a little bit. Not a lot though, because I've got other options. So for me, it was like handy to have, I think, there, but not wow, it wasn't blowing me away. I know some mix engineers like it. The high frequency compressor does its job. Very handy to have, especially at the end of your stage if you're using it on the mix bus, so that you can, just take that kind of edge off, which is nice. And then the transformer, I liked the transformer, gave it a real vibe, so I liked that a lot. I put that on most things that I was using with it. It did take away a little bit from the low end, but I did like the sound of it. So, I mean, overall, the unit I think is a great piece of kit to have. I would suggest that it's very similar to the Louder Than Liftoff Silver Bullet. I actually think I could get more out of the Silver Bullet, so that's something to keep in mind. I know there's a lot of hype around the Fusion. I don't want to slate it or slag it off or anything, because it is still a great unit, but very similar to the Louder Than Liftoff, so check that out. I actually preferred the EQ on the Louder Than Liftoff. And now a lot of other people were saying, would I have a Teglia Cream or a Fusion? Which one would you do? But as a finishing unit, they are pretty different. The Teglia Cream is brilliant. Yeah, you want one. Is the top end and the bottom is just lovely. It works really well. The compressor's great. It's a great bit of kit, but it is a compressor and EQ. It's not as vibey as the Fusion. It hasn't got all the sort of stereo spreads and things that the Fusion has got. So as a finishing box, the Fusion is probably better if you're looking for more kind of gadgetry. But the Teglia Cream is just really nice as a real sort of analog finisher. So to get loads of really nice smooth high end and punchy stuff, look here for that. I'll put some links below for you to see my reviews on the Louder Than Liftoff and the Teglia Cream. So anyway, less of my chat. I hope that's cleared up a few little errors from the first time I've put this video up. And yeah, here we go with the samples. So for us to test the vintage drive section out first, which is one of the main features of this unit, I've put the input trim to -3 because I'm going to be driving it by +3. Really, we want to do this because we want to be able to hear exactly what the flavour it's adding. It's very easy to add 3 dB with this and get really excited that it sounds amazing because obviously it's 3 dB louder, so of course it's going to. But by doing this, you'll then get a taste of exactly what it's doing and the sound. So I've got a density at 6, it goes up to 10 I think here. But so we've got it on 6, just over halfway, and yeah, +3 with it, the input on -3. So let's listen how that sounds. I'll dip it in and out as we go. So next up is the Violet EQ section. I've set this up so it's +3 on both. We get a nice bit of smiley face action with a 70 Hz and an 8K just to make sure that we can hear exactly what's going on. And I've put the trim down a touch as well, just by 2 dB, just so that it sort of balances it off a bit so that we're not just impressed by the level again. So I'll play the track and I'll switch in and out and you can listen to the EQ for yourself. So next thing to check out is the high frequency compressor. So let's do this for these hi-hats and see how we get on. So next we move on to the stereo image. So let me just mono some bass. I've got it on +2. I found that anything wider than +2 on mastering anyway started to sound a little bit too phasey. So let's start at +2 and then I'll mono the bass to -12. So it's monoed, but then over the mono you can hear the bass. Okay, now we're going to just check out this transistor setting. So let's play that in and out. So now I'm going to do a version on the main section only. We're going to go all in on it. I'm not sure that I suggest doing this, but here you go. You can hear how the box sounds with everything going.